like and subscribe. Now. People who quit their jobs on the first day. What was your I'm outta here moment? Summer job working for a landscape architect. Got to the job site and he asked me to dig a hole in some rocky dirt. I asked for a shovel. He didn't have one. I asked for a hand spade. He didn't have one. He told me to just dig the hole with my bare hands and then he drove off to another site leaving me completely alone. I dug for a little bit and then said F this and left. Had the job specified that I needed to supply my own tools I could have, but it didn't, and I wasn't going to work for somebody that expected folks to dig through hard, rocky soil with their hands. On the first day of working at Amazon warehouse, the managers broke down to everyone how 15-minute break works there. Walking to the break room is 2 minutes, 10 minutes of actual break and then 2 minutes to go back to your stations. It took me 2 minutes to walk to my car and I took a forever break. I answered an ad for a babysitting job. I was already working on a casual basis but it was sporadic, so I thought some after hours babysitting would be welcome extra cash. The couple were both in the military and proceeded to tell me that I would be staying in the spare room and looking after their 6-month-old child around the clock as well as doing the housework. I would have 1 day off every 2 weeks. They said it is cash in hand so I could sign on to the dole unemployment benefit to make up the rest of the money. I left on the spot. They wanted a live-in housemaid and nanny, not a babysitter, and they were not able to pay for one. Why they thought it was up to me to illegally collect the dole to subsidize them, I don't know. Applied for a job at my longtime favorite restaurant. Celebrated my birthday there every year. Owner asks me to come in for basically a tryout. As I communicated, I was looking at other job possibilities. I come in and they just stick me on dishwashing for an hour. No biggie. Then their dishwasher doesn't show up, so the kitchen manager asks me to stay one for their lunch rush. Sire, I'll get paid for the hours. I do. Kitchen staff was nice, so I was happy to help out even though I figured I'd be taking a different job. I fill out a time card at the end of the shift and tell the manager I probably won't be back. He understands and thanks me for the help. Fast forward a couple weeks and he tells me to email the owner after I ask him if I should pick up my measly paycheck. I do. She basically tells me to F off over text, tells me it was staging and that she told me I won't be paid. I respond that I understand that, but that I stayed an extra 3 hours which I was told I'd be paid for. She stops responding. I decide I want to be petty over the $40, so I get the Statwa Labor Department involved. Dude goes in there and makes her pay me for the hours including the first staging hour. Couple weeks later I got my $40. Never went back to that restaurant. I was a waitress, the only waitress, at a just opened diner. The boss didn't have me sign any paperwork. Everything was under the table, but that wasn't what made me quit at the end of the night. In order to get me where he wanted me to go, he would pinch my skirt at my upper thigh, not quite the butt but very close, and pull me around like it was a leash. Needed me in the kitchen, rather than call me. He would come out, pinch my skirt and pull to the kitchen. Needed me at the cash machine, again. Come over to wherever I was. Didn't matter if I was serving a customer, and would grab my skirt to pull me. That act in itself made some customers uncomfortable. Mind you, one couple left an almost 50% tip in the end, but I think it was more out of pity and embarrassment on my behalf. I was supposed to come in the next day, but I called that night and said the job wasn't for me. I came in a couple days later to turn in my apron and he just took a wad of cash out of his pocket and paid me then and there. God, he was creepy. I think it was a smart move to quit. Had an orientation for an alarm company. Next day manager calls and says don't worry about going into the office and to meet at Planet Hollywood. They like to get to know the employees better over lunch. Next day I go into the office and another employee whom I had not met says you must be Scandal 929. I was like ah. They responded light-skinned, pretty boys, how the manager described me. Insane conversation. I found out no one else had ever been invited for a get to know you lunch. I'm out. I was hired to be a waitress, which has a lower hourly wage due to tips. The entire shift they had me wash dishes in the sink, but paid me waitress wages. A few months later the restaurant was investigated for a number of fraud activity. It was a small independent insurance agency in 2006. My first day there, the owner, A true fossil. Said email and fax were strictly forbidden as he only believed in communication in person. By phone. Or through mail. Left for lunch and never went back. I couldn't imagine the inefficiency I'd have dealt with had I stayed. They ultimately closed their doors, so it was definitely the right decision. I interviewed for a professional marketing assistant and got the job straight away. I was under the impression that I would be an assistant to the man I was interviewed by. When I showed up for my first day, the same waiting room I was in the previous day was full of people. I quickly learned that we were all hired, and that I would be a door-to-door salesperson selling some pretty useless I spent my entire day inside a Starbucks applying for other jobs and went home, got paid, but never went back. When the microwave in the lunchroom was coin activated. I wasn't the person, but I was training a new guy at a movie theater. A customer asked for extra butter. She was nice and normal, not a mean or rude customer, the kind I would pay to handle all day long. He puts the popcorn tub down, says I'm going to the bathroom, takes off his apron and walks out the front door and never came back. Salesman for Kirby vacuums. First sale call was to a single elderly woman who was supporting her son in hospital. They got us in the door by offering a free carpet clean as a demonstration. The supervisor training me pushed and pushed to make the sale until this old woman was in tears. Just as she was about to sign the paperwork, I asked if she actually wanted to vacuum and she said it was lovely but she couldn't afford it. I took the paperwork away from her and said not to worry. Outside I told the supervisor I quit, to which he replied I would have been fired anyway. No love lost. I hung around for half an hour playing on my phone to make sure the supervisor left because he was a real piece of work. It was a petrol station and the manager wanted me to work for free until I had learned their computer systems to what he deemed a satisfactory extent. I agreed to do it because I needed a job, and he brought me in at 7 AM on my first day. However, he was not present to go through the training with me, so I was just standing around kind of helping out on the forecourt but not really knowing what I should be doing. Not learning anything. After about an hour and a half without the manager showing up or anyone training me on anything, I decided that I wasn't going to continue to be taken advantage of and told the cashier to pass on the message to the manager that I had quit. It was my first day at Five Guys. It was around 10:30 PM and they told me it was time to clock out. Despite not having finished closing, I then worked until almost midnight. I did not return. One of the people I hired a couple years back asked me what time she was supposed to clock out for her shift. Part of the job is the cleanup after we close, which can take a variable amount of time depending on how busy the place was that night, how much we need to restock, and so on. On Fridays and Saturdays, we usually don't get everybody out until 2:30 AM, and cleanup can take 2 hours. On a Monday, we might start cleaning at 1:30 when the place empties out and be out of there by 2. So it really depends. After explaining that, she looked at me with a kind of sad expression and said okay, so clock out at 2:30 and then leave whenever I'm done. I actually helped her report her previous employer after that. She thought it was normal that you kept working after clocking out, and had been doing it for about 3 years. I would probably just smile at them all confused and laugh like, what the F, is that a joke? The second I'm off the clock I am vacating that building post haste, my friend. I will waste as little unpaid seconds of my time as possible exiting the premises. Worked at McDonald's years ago in their assistant manager training program. Had gotten hired right out of the army. First day I met with the store manager where I'd be working and training and noted that she spent majority of the time doing entry level work and then working OT to do store manager work. She told me this was pretty common because of the type of people they'd hire. Her office was a counter and she told me she had bought a chair but corporate made her remove it. She was really nice, worked her A off and was intelligent and told me she'd been at McDonald's for 10 years. I imagined working my A off only to be told I couldn't have a chair and decided that night I wasn't going to work for a company like that. My first day working at EB Games. I was super excited to be there. The first half of my shift was basically tidy up the shelves. It was a high traffic location so the shelves always need tidying. After 5 hours of following kids around and putting things away I go on break. When I come back my manager is standing in his strangely empty store absolutely aghast, staring at a huge steaming pile of shit on the carpeted floor. Apparently a homeless person had walked in. Without saying a single word he dropped trow and emptied his bowls. My boss at me and says, "Oh good, you're back. Just in time. Clean that up. I'm going for lunch." I laughed at him and told him, "You can't be serious. I'm not going near that." He responds with, "It's your job. I'm taking a break. I want it gone before I get back." I told he's going to have to deal with it on his own because I don't need this job that bad. So I quit. I grabbed my coat and went home. 1 week later the district manager calls me up to apologize and offer me my job back. Plot twist. The manager actually took the shit on the floor. It's the employee initiation. Young and naive right out of college, took a marketing job. My interview was great. Nothing shady seemed to be going on and no immediate red flags. After 4 hours of training, my first day consisted of going door to door in a suburban town trying to sell cable to older people. We were told to dress for business, so I'm hiking around for miles in my best skirt, suit jacket and heels. Hours were from 9-5 but we didn't get back to the business until well after 10 PM. Not to mention, the person I was shadowing was able to make a sale to an older gentleman who seemed to have memory issues. I noped the F right out of there. Electronics store. My first day we had to attend a class where they teach people how to upsell folks. Basically walked you through ignoring what they ask you for and using their ignorance of the equipment against them. I thought that was really scuzzy. Then they went on to tell us about a commission style bonus program that basically forced employees to upsell everyone. When we took the break for lunch that first day I peaced out and went home. Never got paid for those 4 hours, but I never regretted bouncing on that. Worked in a hotel for a day. No one told me where anything was. Got chewed out for it. Guests enjoying their meals told me to pay no mind, I was doing a good job and that my boss is a C. I told the manager that I was quitting and wouldn't be doing the next shift. I arrived the next day, returning a work uniform, and my supervisor approached me and yelled at me for being late. I told her I already quit, but if I was working, technically I was 5 hours early for my shift. Absolute nutcases. They hired me to work full time. I had interviewed to work full time. I was trying to quit a horrible job, and this job was on the other end of town. I needed enough money for the bus pass, and to make up the difference and more of quitting my old job, they hired me and showed me my schedule. I showed up for my first day. Things are going good. Then my manager called me in, sat me down, and explained that they'd have to cut me down to 15 hours a week because they'd hired too many fine people. I explained, painfully, that I had to take a bus an hour each way and wouldn't be able to pay rent or food after that. He said I could always hold out and hope people quit. I told him he could start with me, took off my apron and stormed out in tears. I was hired at a chain restaurant to be a hostess. I was so excited because my last job was washing dishes, and because of my eczema, I had to quit. It was too painful to do that job. So, I arrived at my new job dressed up to be a hostess, and those mfers took me back to the kitchen to do dishes because the dishwasher just quit. I noped out of there real fast. I didn't quit, but it was an interview many years ago. The position was for an admin assistant. I got to the place and it was in the back of a strip mall, kind of. Just a small parking lot and a forest. I go into interview and the guy tells me it is in fact not an admin position but an alarm system cold calling position. I immediately knew he was wasting my time and his, but finished it out. He told me there would be a lot of evenings just him and I working. I don't think so. He also said that he loves to reward his team for good sales and always takes them to Mexico. I walked out and told my husband, BF at the time, there was no way I was taking that. I got a call for a second interview but never picked up the phone. So sketch. I technically quit before my first day. I got hired at a well-known gift store. I was hired with the understanding that I would work Saturdays, Sundays, and a grand total of 8 hours a week. So 2 4-hour shifts. Also at minimum wage. Not a problem with me. Done that before. I would just pick up a part-time job for rest of the week. No. Apparently that wasn't allowed. The manager thought that was a horrible thing and disrespectful to her. I should only work for them and only them, and I should have better control over my money if I can't survive on $64 a week before taxes. Yeah, didn't show up cause F that noise. She called pissed off that I wouldn't show up to such a opportunity. It was a waitress gig for a local restaurant. I finished my first day, then was told that training would continue for 6 weeks. While I was in training, all of the tips I got had to be given to my trainer. I was being paid less than $2 an hour. I called the next day and said it wasn't gonna work out. My very first job was at a little drive-in restaurant close to my high school. I showed up to work the first day. The lady said I had to pay her $50 for training. She showed me around the place and said that my pay would be $4.50 an hour as a car hop. This was in 2010. And all the tips I made went into a bucket with all the other girls' tips. At the end of the night, she counted up tips, kept 20% for herself and split the rest up evenly among every employee. Also, part of our job was one day a week we had to spend 4 hours cleaning her house. It seemed super shady. I literally left after listening to her go over all these rules. My dad was pissed until I explained. And another girl confirmed and my dad agreed I did the right thing. Had 2 interviews to work housekeeping at a hospital. Got a call the night of the second interview at around midnight from the guy saying I was just so excited I wanted to call and tell you I'm gonna call you to offer you the job tomorrow. Should have taken that as the first red flag, but I needed the job. I go in for my first day of training and he has printouts of my Facebook wall and my boyfriend's. He started asking me how long we had been together and made it clear he knew everything so not to lie to him. It was so uncomfortable. I leave his office and do some training. We break for lunch and he sits with me in the cafeteria asking how it's been going so far, etc. Then tells me he expects to see me at his church Sunday. I haven't gone to church in like 10 years at this point. We all have a quick meeting in our main room and I stay back after everyone had left. I put my badge, keys and walkie on the desk and walk the F out. I felt bad, but it was no wonder why they can't keep anyone. He called me 4 months afterwards asking what had happened. He was worried sick. He deserves answers. Blah blah blah. I had called their HR the day after I had walked out to tell them I quit and why, so they had to have told him. He had no reason to keep contacting me. I went into orientation for a new job as truck driver. Obviously you know you will be away from home, but this was shy. Out on the road 30 days at a time. Then only 36 hours. Or 1.5 days at home. You only work 6 out of 7 days. So 4 of those days you just sit at the truck stop unable to move and not getting paid. Can't bring a pet of any type. So I would only be home 18 days a year. On the road for 347 days a year and unpaid for 52 of them. The no pets rule was the final straw for me. I will not be out 30 days alone with no little friend to keep me sane. I noped out of there. I was a cashier at this cafeteria for a large company in my town. The people that worked at the company would put their tips in a bucket and the people made a lot of money, so there was like 10s and 20s. The manager of the cafe wouldn't let me have any of tips because she said that cashiers couldn't be trusted, so she would ship the tip money to a church in El Paso. I immediately knew that this was a load of bullshit. I just never went back. It's also illegal, I think, to collect money for one thing but do something else with it without disclosing who what it is for. When at the daily meeting a manager said if they found out who put a paper bag with human excrement in her employee's locker. My very first job was at a buffet restaurant that was popular with senior citizens and known for their desserts. I was asked to get another coconut cream pie from the back, and as I was getting it out of the fridge, another employee bumped into me and I dropped it on the floor, pie side down. This employee's someone who'd worked there for years. Solution was to just scrape off all the whipped topping and replace it. I was horrified. They served pie that had been on the extremely dirty floor and never went back. Time hotel gig in Raleigh, NC when I was young and desperate for a job. Any job. Came in to relieve the cigarette hag overnight lady who told me about the badge she kept beneath the counter. Which rooms had the prostitutes and which rooms were for the genuinely lost tourists. How not to give out towels to certain people because they had 10 plus people to a room and they were trying to get them to leave. While she was talking to me, one of the prostitutes came up and paid her with sweaty boob money. Also they expected me to do laundry in the back room in between babysitting the front desk. Also to watch out for stray needles or paraphernalia in the sheets. I overheard a man in the lobby on the phone talking about how he had a friend who was in jail and he was going to hire him to kill his cousin who was in that same jail. All in between bites of bargain bin Fruit Loops from the continental breakfast. I left. They never sent me my check for working that day and I never called to get it. Took a summer job at a textile plant and the trainer said, forget about taking a break if you want to stay caught up. Not me, but I was training a new lifeguard. After our shift was mandatory staff training for our entire crew, where we practice rescues. Once she found out we actually had to practice and go in the water, she just walked out, not really sure what kind of job she thought she had signed up for. Ended up being a scam to try and get free labor. I went for a job interview as a security guard. A man and a woman asked me my name, asked me how strong I was, then hired me and asked me to start immediately. That started alarm bells ringing. To questions in our interview, and I am employed and working with no discussion about anything else. They took me down to their warehouse. Office interview was above it, and told me to start moving boxes from a shelf into a truck. I said hang on. The job is security, not manual labor, and then they started getting really shy with me and saying if you want the job then you need to do this as part of it. I was like yeah, now I am out, and walked out. Total scam. There was no job, and it really pissed me off because I could have gone to another interview at that time but choose to go there instead. Started a new job unloading shipping containers and was told they had to be empty by midday. This was imperative because a new one was going to arrive in the early afternoon. It was a two-man job if we both worked our ass off to get it done. Boss says also your offsider is off work today. You will need to get this cleared. I just walked out. Even if it was a trial by fire, I wasn't interested in working for the CS. F that. Went into an Italian restaurant for my first day of work and I got 3 red flags on the very first day. 1, the manager said he had lots of hours for me and getting shifts would be no problem. Every single other employee told me that they were struggling for hours and that they had no idea why they hired me. 2, everyone said the manager was an a-hole. Even the customers. 3, it was my first day there and I actually had to teach the woman training me how to do 1 or 2 things. I had a job for 1 day selling home security equipment door to door. The whole idea was basically to make it seem like you're doing them a service and then lock the customer into 5-year contracts. My supervisor and I were in this one home of a family that hardly some English. The father said they had been struggling with finances, but my supervisor kept pushing it on them, and the customer seemed like he didn't fully understand what was going on. I couldn't in good conscience take these people that were already struggling and put them in a worse position. Fast food chain. I was 17. I found out during training that the place had been robbed 3 times in the past month and 1 employee was seriously injured. Not worth a $5 per hour. I got a job at a Build-A-Bear knockoff at the end of a mall that wasn't very busy. My interview with the owners was interesting. They were an older couple who said that they had wanted to open a Chick-fil-A, but you need about $1 million to do that. My first day, 1 other girl was working, and she didn't really talk to me. I had basically no training and she disappeared into the back. I was standing at the register area, which was underneath a giant storybook mushroom. A mother and her young son walk in and start to look at the bearskin options. I greeted them and left them to look around. They ended up leaving after a couple minutes and my co-worker reappeared from the back with the cordless phone and handed it to me. It was my boss. He told me that when a customer walks in, he wants me to come out from under the mushroom to them. Come out from the mushroom. After he finished speaking to me, I hung up and went to my co-worker and asked about the phone call. She said the place has cameras set up and the owners watch them from their house and call in a lot. I did not come back to work after that day. I worked in one jail and on my first day whoever runs the investigations of prisons busted my sergeant and 5 other COs for bringing drugs and effing male inmates. Didn't even wait till the end of my shift.